Okay, students, we want to move on to another phase where we're going to show how we can use solving equation by factoring in application problems in geometrical application problems. Okay, so typically you'll get like at least one question in this form on your exam, whether you're doing a college algebra course or an introductory or pre-algebra college course. So here we go. This is saying that and if this should not be the first video you're looking at, or it should not be the first stage to solve problems like these, you should at least have a grasp on how to factor expressions and how to solve equations through factoring before you attack problems like these. So if you haven't, I suggest you refer to the videos on factoring. We're going to say from stage 1 through stage 6. All right, so continuing, this is saying the width of a rectangular picture frame is 7 inches less than its length. The area of the frame is 60 square inches. Find the dimensions of the picture. So here we go. We have a rectangular frame, right? And we know the properties, one of the properties of a rectangle is the opposite sides are equal. So we have the width and the length. We have our L and our W. And what is it saying about the width and the length? So it's saying that the width of the rectangular picture frame is 7 inches less than its length. So we don't know what the length is, but it's comparing the width. I'm so sorry. It's comparing the width with the length. So it's saying we don't know what the length is. So that's our unknown. And it's saying that the width is 7 inches less than its length. So this is the length minus 7. So here we have our 2 dimensions. And another property we know about a rectangle is that the area is equal to the length times the width. And it's saying here that the area is 60, right? And we know the length is our unknown x, and that the width is 7 less than its length, which is translated as x minus 7, 7 less than the length, okay? Good. So if we look at this here, we can see that there are the product of x and another x term will produce an x square term. The product of, I should say, the product of x and another x factor will produce an x square factor. So obviously this looks like it's leaning towards being a quadratic equation because it said there's an equal sign, so it's an equation. And another thing we know about quadratic equations is that it must equal to 0. So I will perform some distributive property here. And then I'll make sure I set my equation equal to 0 by transposing that 60 using the opposite operation. Okay, so now we know since the leading coefficient of this side of the equation here is 1, I can use my final term, my c, right? Because remember, this is ax plus bx, ax squared plus bx squared plus c, right? So the coefficient of x is usually a, coefficient of b is of the x square is a, the coefficient of the x term is b, and the constant is denoted by c. So I can take my c and I can find factors of c that when I subtract them, and the reason why I'm saying subtracting is whenever your c or your a times c is negative, then a subtraction has to occur in order for you to find the middle term. And if we have a negative factor, it means one of the factor was positive and one of the factor was negative. Good. So if you're versed in your tables, I hope you are at this stage of the game, you know that the factors 5 and 12 will give you 60. And if we subtract these 2 factors, if they were terms and we subtracted them, we'll have a remaining term of 7. So notice that it's negative 7. So according to the previous videos, that the bigger factor usually takes on the sign of the middle. So that would be 12 and 5, right? So it's negative 12 and positive 5. So that clearly states that I can skip my steps and go straight. I know that my two factors will have a negative 12 term and the other factor will have a positive 5 term. So now that I have my equation in factored form equal to 0, I can set each factor equal to 0, and that will find a value of x. So here x is positive 12, and over here x is negative 5. Now the beauty about this is that it's important to know that when you are doing geometrical problems through factoring, you only are to take the positive value of x. Take positive value of x. Because we can't have a negative side, right? So my x is 12. So here I'm able to find my length, which is 12. And then I'm able to find my width, which is 12 minus 7, which is 5. And so it says to find the dimensions of the picture frame. So the L is 12, W is 5. And if you want to double check this, if you were to find the area, remember they said the area is 60. Area of 60, if I was to say 12 times 5, I will get 60. All right, so that's just one of the problems that you can possibly see on your exam. All right, let's try another one. Here we have the width of a rectangle is 1 inch than less its length. As you can see, they're following a pattern, and it says that the area is 90 inches square. Find the length and the width. So, you know, one question it says find the dimensions. Next question, they were explicit, find the length and the width. All right, so you can see they're following a pattern. So I'm going to set up my rectangle with my width and my length, right? And it's saying that the width is 1 inch less than its length. We don't know what the length is. That's my unknown, but I know the width is 1 inch less than. So I have my two dimension, and it said the area is 90. So area equals to length times width. And the area is 90 in this case. My length is x, and that's my x minus 1. And just like the previous problem, it's obvious here that I'm going to have a quadratic equation. So I'm going to distribute, just taking it in steps. Transpose my 90. All right. And here I see that my constant term is negative 90. So I know I have to perform a subtraction to equal negative 1, because that's my middle term, negative 1. And it clearly looks here. This is a beautiful factor here. It looks like 9 and 10. The difference between 9 and 10 is 1, right? So it's going to be negative 10, because the greater factor takes the sign of the middle. Because remember, when you're subtracting terms, you have to keep the sign with a greater magnitude. So obviously, if negative is remaining here, then the greater magnitude was a negative number. So this is 0 equals the factor x minus 10 and x plus 9. And then if we were to solve them separately, we'll have x is negative 9 and x is positive 10. And of course, we'll take the positive dimension, because the positive value of x, because dimensions cannot be negative. And then we'll substitute it back. We find that our length is positive, it's 10. I don't have to reiterate that it's positive, right? And the width is 1 less than its length, which is 9. So the dimensions are, or the length is 10 and 9. So basically, these questions just basically look the same on all your exams. Good luck with that. If you still don't understand, you need some clarity or more explanation, you know how to find me.